who is expected to be present here.
I think Jason's on the way. He said he was on 95. I see Mr. Perry's on.
Okay. Well, in the interest of time, it is after 9 o'clock. And so we will begin. And if you would, thank you all for being here. There he is. It was closer than we thought. Good morning, Jason. We're waiting for you. Me in a brief word of prayer. Oh God, we thank you for another day. We thank you that you have allowed us to be in this day. And we pray that as we come together, that as we join together in persons, that our minds, bodies, spirit are fixed upon you first, and our school system secondly, with the emphasis on our children. And as we will be considering today, the entire family, with emphasis on parents and their involvement. And we pray that all of our discussion will be in accordance with the best interest of everyone involved. And again, we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Once again, thank you all for being here. Our consideration this morning is the policies entitled Parents' Bill of Rights with 2023 fall updates. Some of this information we have seen before and have considered before, but it's good for us to be reminded of prior information and to consider how that information that already is part of our policies applies to specifically the family setting within our schools and the relationship between our schools and our families. And of course, all of that comes together in focus for the best interest of our children. On the first page 1 of 14, and I'm going to emphasize the highlights. Some highlights are in blue, as you know, some are in red. And this particular manual is fairly thick. And so in the interest of facilitation and moving along as efficiently as we possibly can, Parents are responsible for cooperating with the school employees to facilitate their children's compliance with school policies concerning homework, school attendance, and behavior. And of course, those are basic responsibilities of our children. And again, we are simply reiterating our invitation to our parents to be a viable person or persons, have a vital role in what happens in their child's life. And I believe that for the most part, our parents are on board. As I visited the schools and I have spoken with school administrators, I hear positive comments in this particular function of our schools, which, as you know, is vital. And the first page reiterates some commonalities, some facts that are inherent in everything and that we're already aware of, but bear repeating nonetheless. And right off the bat, following the first paragraph, restates the purpose. For the purpose of this policy, parent includes parents, legal guardians, and legal custodians of students who are under 18 years old and who have not been emancipated. We also know that the parental aspect of our school system does not always include the traditional nuclear family. We have students that live with other relatives and perhaps, not perhaps, definitely on occasions with foster parents. And so as we review the policy and as we see fit, one of the purposes is if as a body that we see a need for an addition or an addition that we can offer that to the North Carolina School Board Association for change as need be. Begins with Section A, Parental Involvement Plan. And there are a number of listing of expectations, methods, events, however you want to refer to them or to encapsulate them into the parental involvement plan. Some of them are underlined. There are a couple of strike-throughs, but a lot, and I would say most, are part of what's already happening. There is room for improvement, and that's why we're considering this policy today. Some of these, the parents are, just like we are, in need of training. You know, thankfully, we're able to update our communication methods on a regular basis. We have the technical capability, and thankfully, to a degree, and I'm gonna say to a large degree, we have been blessed with being able to extend information and communication and filling the need for moving forward with our children's education. And I'm not going to read through all these. You of course can read from them. But the G, I think, really sums it up. Collaboration, that's a key word. with community agencies and other organizations is needed, those are my words, to provide resources to strengthen school programs, families, and student learning, and student health awareness among parents by addressing the need for health programs and student health services, which are linked to student learning. And I really was impressed in the content and the structure of this particular manual, in that it wove health, both mental and physical health, throughout this whole composition, for every aspect that came along in relationships between students, teachers, school staff, parents, and the community. Some aspect of health was addressed in every single section that I saw, and I was particularly pleased with that. And again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read through all this word for word, but I did underline and circle and highlight some areas. A written, and I'm now referring to the paragraph number 2 on page 2 of 14. Each school participating in the Title I program must develop with parents and family members a school level written parent and family engagement plan that involves the parents in the planning and improvement of Title I activities and describes the means for carrying out school level policy, sharing responsibility for students' academic achievement, building the capacity of school staff and parents for involvement, and increasing accessibility for participation of all parents and family members of children participating in Title I programs. To me, that paragraph encapsulates and summarizes in a nutshell what the dynamic, what the activities, being on the same page, as we often say, and each person and each group of individuals, each segment of the participants and stakeholders in the school system are all on the same page. And Dr. Williamson and I were talking just briefly before we started, and I think we would have agreement among everyone here that those aspects of the school student family relationship, not perfect, but are growing and improving. And I've been in schools and seen parents come in, and I can go back, and some of us have been around a while, can go back and know that's not always been the case. It's still not 100% the case. But generally, I'm seeing parents come in with smiles on their faces. I'm seeing administrators and office personnel greet, and I'm not saying this has not happened before. I'm just reiterating what I'm seeing that I personally am very, very pleased to be observing. That they're truly to the max living out their role as a public servant, our teachers and every school staff member.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So our title is parental involvement, which indicates they have students enrolled in our school. Yet the family engagement piece. So my question goes to a definition. Are we defining involvement and engagement as the same? And if not, can we, to the title of this policy, have it parental involvement / engagement? Because engagement may mean that we have parents that want to be involved or adults in our buildings, and we need that. Can you define?
Thank you, Dr. Williams. That is duly noted. And I like the word engagement. That
I can definitely share the definition, district, so we're defining. We're defining family engagement as the active, ongoing, two-way collaboration between the school, families, and community partners with the overall focus of student learning. And so I see that definition all in number 2. And as we go about the district continue to build capacity for family engagement, we're providing the data, the strategies, and opportunities for families and parents to actually partake and give feedback. So it's grown a bit. The district parental advisory committee is still new, but like you said, Mr. Gentry, you can tell that the relationship and things are new, because when we present parents with the opportunity to give feedback, they're a little hesitant, but as long as they are bought into the idea of having that opportunity to communicate and give feedback, I think it's going to give them more of a courage to continue to give feedback. I would like to see that grow, more parents participate. I think that a couple of years ago, when we started on this new idea to redefine family engagement, I think we had to set a standard for what we wanted it to look like, and we're slowly climbing that mountain to get there.
exactly. And our information for today, this particular manual, and again, I was pleased and encouraged as I read about the various ways that we enlist and invite parent engagement. There are more opportunities for activities that can and do involve the family and the community. And that's another thing I'm seeing and hearing about, in addition to parents. And as I've stated earlier, as we all know, that there are people who assume the role of parent, in that we have many students, let's face it, still, that do not have parents who are active, and it's not always for a negative reason. Some of them have to work, cannot be there sometimes. But my point is, there are more and more opportunities in extracurricular activities, and not always athletic activities. Don't have anything against athletics, but let's face it, the majority of our students do not participate in athletics and need some other outlet, some other way to communicate, to enhance their social skills, to discover new skills in play. My goodness, we've got these new playgrounds everywhere. There's going to be a non-school playground which we hopefully we'll get into at some point. There are more and more opportunities for students and their teachers and parents and community members to interact. And when that happens, management of student behavior, I will not use the word or the phrase becomes easier, but it opens the door for a new style of behavioral management. And those of us that have been right there know what I'm talking about. If you can communicate with a phrase or a word, or sometimes just a look or a nod, a little touch on the shoulder, and that student gets the message and can move on, that facilitates the operation of the school and the smoothness of how that school day is going to go. And I've seen principals and teachers doing this, and I've sat in their offices and heard that's the style. Anthony, we had a good talk about that the other day, and it's just it's a joy to me just to walk into school and see everybody smiling. including students. I mean, and I noticed that even on the first day back after Christmas break, they were smiling. They were having fun, but they were learning.
So if then by definition, if it does not change the policy involvement, they have a right under policy. Engagement means something different, but it would not change the policy to add that. Bobby, would it run you down?
No, we would just need to add that to the title, and I've got that. Once we get these approved at our full board, we will add engagement to the title of it.
Okay.
And there are, I'm looking at one here, but there are numerous invitations to parents to become more involved in their child's course of study. And I'm particularly referencing the last paragraph on page 2 of 14. And there are opportunities for parents to inspect and review particular instruction materials. The parents should make a request in accordance with policy 3210. And again, I see that happening also. And then here, this verifies what I just said. The first full paragraph on 3 of 14 refers to the nature, information about the nature and purpose of all clubs and activities, curricular and extracurricular offered to the school is available in the school's main office. Now obviously that can be done in different ways. The first one that comes to mind is the student handbook. But I've also seen in poster form, very neat and stylish postal form, the dates and the title of the various activities, and of course electronically as well as is in print. I see that happening as well. And again, oral or written communication is emphasized in the next paragraph. I've got a question here beside the third full paragraph on page 3 of 14. The principal or designee shall provide the parent of each student in kindergarten, first or second grade with written notification of the student's reading progress. And this notice will be provided 3 times a year following benchmark assessment, and will include assessment results where the child may not be reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, instructional support activities to use at home. And I'll have to say that I have not seen an actual hard copy document of a notice that may be going out to parents. I'm seeing evidence of that in the climate in the classrooms. Would anybody like to comment on that?
So basically, after each benchmark window, which we refer to as BOI, MOI, EOI, we do send home what's called a home connect letter that will allow the parents to see their progress on the assessment. We also have already sent home for kindergarten through actually 4th grade is any student who's demonstrating reading difficulty, they're on an individual reading plan. And so with that reading plan, we've sent home notification to the parents, letting them know that the child does have a plan at this time. In that letter, it does also include some activities that they can do at home to continue to support the child. And we actually just sent home that letter again after the 2nd quarter when we're MOI. So they've already received that as well. Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, yes.
Okay, it's on. Thank you. You know, if you like me, I read through this stuff and then I go back and forget what part I read 3 pages ago. When this Parent Bill of Rights came out and we first started looking at some of the things on it, it was scary as far as ever seemingly little thing that could be done or could be, okay, I got to do this. So my question is this, and it's for time and going through it, what we're doing is fine. If it's written in here in color and not been strike through and it's in blue or some color like that, that is something that our state board has said we need to do and we need to put in. And if it's in dark black print, it was already there. So my first question is, we got this, we got to approve it. On the school level, the principals are responsible for taking care and making sure this is done. We got some principals in here. And I'm sure they're doing that and will be doing that. Because, you know, just like Mr. Gentry, what you just read, that's a little piece that a parent could go there and pull and say, you didn't do that. And they could go there and find places like that all throughout there, all through this thing. Now, after administrators are taking care of this, we got different groups down here, or is it one group, Dr. Williamson, that's in charge of looking at this whole Parents' Bill of Rights? Is there different groups that's responsible for going back to principals and saying, are you doing this, making sure this has been done? You got documentation, this has been done? Because I'm adding all that to say, when this first came out, it was like, somebody's going to catch us on something in this bill. And as much as we can do to avoid that happening, I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, each department, and where are we in terms of finalizing that document that will be on site?
Mr. Craig, you may have to turn on.
So currently, we are working on the parents' guide for the Parents' Bill of Rights. And so we have a lot of pieces that are already in there. So we should, in the next month, be able to have the whole document finished that'll share with parents exactly what they can do and what they need to do in order to get some of this information. That will also be shared with every single principal so that they're clear of how that looks. And so we don't have but a few more pieces to add, because a lot of it was things that we were already doing that were not new. It's just that they were all over in different places. So what it does is really just clearly define everything in one place instead of multiple places. So it's just helping people find where is it at all together in one place.
And then Dr. Carr and Mr. Craig, to your point, part of that document, we designated the contact person who to call if your question is about that. So that's part of that, right?
It is.
And also to add, Mr. Craig, we were much like you, we were overwhelmed when this first came out, but when we started looking at it, we were already doing 95% of what was being required. It may not have been in black and white, but as everyone that sits around the table, we were already notifying parents. We were already actively asking parents to come in. We were asking if parents wanted to review our curriculum, they were more than welcome to do so. So basically, all the Parent Bill of Rights made us do was put it in black and white, so parents could then have a hard copy to say, well, yeah, you are supposed to be doing this. And so every department that it touched, health services, we brought Ms. Jan to the table to clarify how. Ms. Brendelin in terms of family engagement. So everything that was required, we put all of those departments in and addressed them within the policy. Now, the Parent Bill of Rights did not require us to create any additional policies. All it done is required us to go back and touch 7 existing policies that we already had in place, with the most extensive revisions or additions coming here in the parent involvement, and we'll add engagement to that. So that's why when you see all the blue, then most of the work took place within this particular policy.
And then, Bobby, the biggest part is it puts everything in one place.
Yes, sir.
So we've identified the staff member and collected, it's all in one place.
There were some changes about when this started. Now, so when is actual effective date? Is it now or is it next fall? What's as far as when this was put out? When's the effective date?
So the particular accountability guide that would go home to parents, that's not until next fall.
Next fall.
So there
That's
are
fine.
varying pieces of this, the
Mhm.
Parent Bill of Rights.
Mhm.
Some started immediately and others, they've given us an extended timeline, and all of that's addressed in our particular policies here.
And I'll say this one thing, Mr. Gentry, and you hit on it. People coming to school smiling and all that and everything. That's true. And that's good. But we've talked about this before, and everything principals can do towards that, we're thankful for. Some people, their experience to come into school was bad. As students, it was bad, and that's what they remember. So if they have to come back now as a parent with their child, well, it's going to be bad again. So whatever you as administrators can do to change that scenario, and if this Bill of Rights helps do that, putting stuff out, this is what you can do. And I'm gonna go back. We talked last year with all our curriculum stuff. Please come to the school, look at the curriculum, see what it's about. And we started, really in depth doing that last year with the K-8 with the curriculum. So there's things like you say, we've always done, you folks have always done. So it's just, I say, put it on paper and let's get it done.
All right. And also to address another point, Mr. Craig, you brought up how the timelines have changed. So we got our original set of Bill of Rights back in early fall. Well, since that, if you go to the fall updates, they've also changed two of the policies that they released originally. So this is kind of evolving as the General Assembly put out the Parent Bill of Rights. There have been additions to these policies that we will address in the fall updates.
Can I say that the General Assembly might need to talk to some school people and leave it at that and be as nice as I can?
But so that everyone, our folks that are joining us online, everything you see in blue is brand new. That is in addition to what we already had in policy. And I think Mr. Craig touched on that earlier.
And again, a lot's been said, but I don't think it can be overstated. I think for a long time, and I'm not pointing at anybody or any group of people, that to a degree, some parents more than others felt like they were isolated or maybe even ostracized from the formation process of, everything about the school, from the recording or notification of absenteeism, which, we've addressed as a board. I'm going over, I was sitting with someone the other day going over all that this, the board and everybody, not just the board, has brought into the positive change effort and what has become reality. One thing I want to get back here before we leave this, we're all aware that in the recent past, there was some, I'll just use the word controversy about textbook selection, and not textbook selection in general. It was pointed basically at 2 or maybe 3 new textbooks. And as you recall, there was a lot of heated discussion, a lot of community meetings, and that kind of thing was happening. And textbooks are mentioned in this particular paragraph, along with parental, and it mentions the word parental inspection. And then, we also heard, I don't know necessarily in our school system, but, parents want, going into the school libraries and checking out, what's in the content of this book and that book, your different library books. I'm not hearing that, certainly not to the degree that I once was. Maybe some of you will differ with me on that. But I think just the fact of transparency here it is. You are welcome to come in and peruse, check out, literally, sit down at a library table and read. At the appropriate time, if you don't know, ask for a teacher conference and ask them what resources they're using, which include textbooks. I think the guard is down now, and I don't mean that as a sigh of relief. Okay, they're not going to bother us anymore. I think it's opening the door for a stronger two-way communication. I just want to point that out, and I will ask the question: is anyone aware of any type of textbook controversy or questions? And I'm not talking about just those, the two hot ones, any. So I just that was something I had marked here.
Mr. Gentry, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So the parental involvement, Dr. Dallas, Dr. Carl, in terms of kindergarten kids, parents walking child down, our practice of that is what? And we're going to continue. Nothing changes about that. That's an issue every year. Let's talk about that.
And so we still have parents that are walking children down for kindergarten. That is nothing's been stopped for that. The only time that was stopped, of course, was during COVID, but now all the normal procedures that we had in place prior to COVID are in place in the same way that they've been before. So yes, they can't stay right then and there unless they're setting something up to come in, but yes, they're walking kids down if necessary to help transition them into the rooms.
Mr. Bobby, let me, Dr. Williamson, since you mentioned that, let me, if it's Dr. Carr or somebody, clarify this since people might be watching. There's a perception out there, because this was brought to me last year, that board, Ms. Gentry, I'm going to get me and you first. We read every book that's in the library. Now, that was point blank told to me that board members, don't y'all look at every book that's in the library and every book that's in the school? And I said, no, we don't do that. Not each book. And then it's the perception, okay, who down here looks at books and materials? And we went to talking about, do you understand how many books you're talking about? So Dr. Carr, if you could, I know we got procedures on textbooks coming in, books coming in the library. And since you mentioned that about, can you just talk about just for a moment? Because it is parents, so they know with these books, how and what is done with the books.
As far as any textbooks, those are, of course, reviewed before they're even adopted, just to make sure that there's nothing in there that should not be covered or that needs to be moved around, whatever that may be. As far as media books, they check the list to make sure they're not on some sort of banned list or any of those types of things. And they do look at the topics that are being addressed, but they do not read every single book. We do.
Do have that, which we know that, but just that there's things in place to check books coming in. Thank you.
And Mr. Craig, if I may add to that, and Bobby, this is to you. We're moving towards online material more, less hard copy textbooks, but our filters will catch that material. Address that, please, Bobby.
Yeah, so currently we do through Gaggle, we would catch anything that is sent through email to something inappropriate. But as well as if there's anything, our filtering system will not allow anything pornographic and those types of things in natures to go to a student's device.
Okay, any other comments on along those lines? And I'm gonna say any more comments from page 4 of 14. And again, I think we essentially addressed those in total in most of the discussion that's already taken place. I'm going to bring up a hot topic here, and let's face it, it is hot, and I don't mean that in a controversial way necessarily, but there is a lot of discussion, to say the least. I won't say that there's any litigation that I'm aware of, and it's a hot topic not only in our community, but in the state legislature and other places, and that's schools other than public schools. And I'm not going to use the C word necessarily, you know what I mean, when this charter school movement. The paragraph F on page 514 addresses educational choices available to parents, including the type of public school unit available to residents of the county in which the child lives, and non-public options, educational choice options offered within the school system, and programs for scholarship grants for non-public schools. And, you know, obviously this is an ongoing topic. There are a lot of pieces to it. I foresee it, the discussion and yes, controversy extending. There are a lot of governmental bodies also that have a part and are active in this. And there's one ongoing in our community right now, which I will not bring up this time. Some of you, if not most of you, are aware of it. But I just had to mention, or felt like I needed to mention that topic, and I'm just going to be quite honest here in that the public schools, and I'll just address it that way, I believe need to step up in the discussion, and that I'll just put it in as a neutral way as I possibly can. But it seems like we are having, for whatever political, and yes, it is political, social movement or thought that's going on. And at some point, I believe we're going to have to come to a meeting of the minds about this topic, because our children future and their education is currently at stake. And I know this is a loaded topic, and this is just food for thought. And I don't want to get into a lengthy discussion about it, but I think you all understand where I'm coming from.
Mr. Chair, we've had some of those conversations internally, and the right for parents to choose. What I've challenged all of us is to make sure that the public schools of Robeson County is the best choice option for parents. That's what we're working towards. That's how we've addressed it.
Sir, and I believe that it has emerged and is merging further based upon what we are discussing. The intricate thoroughness of treating each child as the valuable person that he or she is. I believe that will go a long way, has gone, and will go further. And I won't say anything else about that. I just felt like I had to mention it. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, and here comes what I was saying earlier about integrating health needs of our students. You know, some good things came out of COVID. It heightened our awareness that we need to be constantly vigilant, making sure that all immunizations for every student are up to date, and that it mentions that very fact in several places. And the paragraph goes on the bottom line is being more cognizant of the health, the physical health of our students. And we've learned how quickly it can be spread. There was an epidemic. It didn't have a name, but I had it, and I usually don't get sick, and I heard there were so many other people in school, out of school, just within the last month, and it was unidentifiable. You couldn't chalk it up as COVID. The doctors wouldn't say, okay, you got COVID. Say you got an upper respiratory or lower respiratory, or both. Y'all know what I'm talking about? You're nodding your heads, and it was going on. And I know we can't do everything possible to address that, but I'm glad to see that we're being more cognizant of the need to do what we can.
Right. Mr. Chair, if I may, Jan, can you bring us up to speed in this area in terms of how we're communicating with parents and all of that?
Yes, sir. The nurses and the CNA staff that are hired at this time are all members of the NCIR registry. That's the North Carolina Immunization Registry. So they have access to that to be able to pull up a child's record to make sure that they are fully immunized before they come into school. We also, at the beginning of the year, in the packets that Ms. Jadil has put together for our kindergarten registration and beginning of year in the handbooks, the parents are notified of the requirements for them to be in school. The nurses also, at the beginning of the rising seventh graders and rising seniors, they also start promoting those immunizations that are required for those two age groups as well. So just to make sure that everybody's fully aware of the requirements for those grade levels.
And we're seeing a better response from parents that our numbers are decreasing, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We start pushing that out months in advance of the beginning. Our kindergarten registration is coming up in March 1. So we've already started promoting that. And typically, some of them still have the misconception that they still have whatever time frame that they need to get those shots, but we still have to adhere by the state law that says if you don't have your immunizations 30 days after the first day of your attendance. Now that could be a floating line if they don't attend school the very first day of school, if they come in later or are new to public schools in North Carolina, they have that 30-day mark from their first day.
And for enrollment purposes, we cannot deny enrollment if they don't have the shots. It's that 30 days.
They have that 30 day, yes, sir. But it is a state law that if they do not have that after their 30th day, they have to be excluded. But typically, and that's why we promote it so early, because we all know that there's a waiting line for doctor's appointments. So that's why we start pushing it ahead of time for those parents to do their due diligence to get their child immunized.
Thank you. And we won't go over all of page 6 of 14 as has been already said. We're concentrating primarily on what's in the blue and red. But again, how I just see and reminded how comprehensive the efforts are more than ever to communicate with parents. And I believe that, as you know, we've stated this earlier, some parents, some have been turned off by what they have viewed as a lack of communication. But I will say this, that communication is a two-way street. And it's not, should not all be on the school administration, the school staff. Parents must meet the school system in however way we want to context that halfway. If there is a comprehensive parent guide available, then parents, please make every effort to access that, to keep it handy, put it in a strategic place, because a lot of effort has gone into making this more comprehensive.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
yes,
since
sir.
we're having, and this is really going to get us over to the opt-in, opt-out as it relates to health services, Jan, and then Dr. Carr, the opt-out, opt-in, let's talk about that because that is a Bobby River, yes.
So when it comes to certain pieces of curriculum, that parents will have an opportunity to opt out, just like they always have, of those pieces. So when we think about certain health or pieces that we have to cover when it comes to sex and those topics, parents opt out of that. And so what we have is there's a process, they'll be notified and they'll have to fill out the form to say that they don't want their child taking that, so they do not take part of that. So none of those things have really changed. It's just that we're making them aware that this piece is, they have to opt out of those pieces. Same with some of the surveys that they're completing when it comes to this. There's quite a few, as long as they're state and federal surveys and surveys that are required, everybody takes them. But then if it's something that deals with certain topics, a parent has to opt in for their child to take part in those surveys. So that's really where the change is as far as what's going on with the opt-in and opt-out.
And also to add what Dr. Carr stated, again, an update was given from when this was originally put in place to cover those opt-in surveys that address the Center for Disease Control and Youth Risk Behavior Surveys. So in the updated fall policy, it does address that. It's not addressed here. So we would have to make that distinction that when we approve policy 1310, we're going to have to look more at the fall update than the original.
Thank you, Mr. Bob. That's well noted. Before moving on and right many of the next pages do not have a lot of the blue, and in the interest of time, if there are no questions, we'll move forward. But I just had to note this, and the more that I communicate with our curriculum and instructional staff, the more I'm impressed with what's happening. And I'm referring to 3I, about third of the way, page 7 of 14. And it's simple. I'm not going to read all those, but to me, it illustrates just how thorough and how intricate and how all-inclusive our assessment practices are. And I picked that up right from hearing or reading 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, our students, through the capable instruction and through the guidance of our curriculum staff here at Central Office, doing a great job. I just want to point that out. And again, as I said, in the interest of trying to expedite here, page 8 of 14.
Mr. Gentry, I'm sorry. Mr. Terry has a question.
Yes.
Mr. Gentry, just let me go back a second to what we were discussing earlier about communication. I was wondering, do we have processes or what procedures do we have around ensuring that communication is distributed when it comes to parents in dual languages where necessary? I know some of the communication that's district-wide is probably standardized and comes in 2 different formats or 2 different languages, but what about like, you know, some of the text messaging systems or some of the calls that are made? Do parents have the means to request those types of communications in 2 languages?
Short answer, Mr. Terry, yes. A lot of our written communication that goes home from schools to families, that is translated either by an email person on staff. We may have to use some computer generated translations for some of our Creole Arabic parents. Our Thrill Share program does also, when we make call outs, if that's designated for the second language to be translated, that happens as well. So every instance where we have the ability to translate, we are sending those documents, oral communications home in a second language.
Appreciate it.
Are there any questions on page 8 of 14 or 9 of 14? I have a question, and it's the context is located in paragraph 3 of 914 about the participation in academic career guidance or personal social counseling service of a generic nature offered to groups of students. And it goes on. And then the parent notification and permission are not required for, and it gives a list there. And there is another paragraph, at least one other paragraph, that addresses student counseling and again, the categories and lists the particular types of counseling. And this is a touchy one. We'll get to that one on down the line. This is on my mind, and that is mental health. And our system has done so much, made so many great strides in mental health, but I know that it can be a touch and go, a sensitive situation when the child's mental health is involved, and certainly notification is in order. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the child himself or herself has a degree of comfort in trusting and being open with that school person, because that school person may get more information. That school person perhaps may be more trusted by the child than the parent. And there are just so many different scenarios there. And I just like to hear maybe a comment or two about that. I think that's kind of a unique, or not kind of, it is a unique topic, a sensitive topic that requires some careful thought. Any thoughts on that?
So, Mr. Gentry, to address this particular, again, this is already in place. So this protects our school counselors and school social workers on campus to provide that immediate attention to children whenever they need it. But there's also part of the Parent School Bill of Rights that also protects the parents in the terms of we should not discourage students from having conversations with their parents about whatever issues they're having. So again, this particular one protects the work of that school counselor and school social worker. And I know Ms. Jadell's online. I'm not sure if she would like to add anything to that.
Yes, so in reference to students that come in with mental health concerns, they can do some counseling with students. They will make sure that they have that contact and that parental responsibility, that they have that. But there are some things outside of the scope of the counselor in regards to school mental health that have to be done outside with a provider. So once the counselor or the social worker touches base with the student and the parent, finds out what we're addressing as far as the concerns and maybe a diagnosis, they can facilitate some things at the school along with the provider as well. And communication happens with getting consent from the parent and the provider. So they do facilitate that at a school, but sometimes it can't go as far in depth as needed. It needs to be done at a mental health with a provider instead. But they do address that, and it is safeguarded in that school with the parents' bill of rights and with the counselors and what they're able to provide.
Thank you.
Janelle, our mental health plan, the review process was just completed by DPI. Can you share the outcomes of that, please?
Yes, sir. They didn't have any recommendations for us with what we have already in the district and what we're providing with our mental health plan and our crisis intervention plans. So that was a good thing that they had no recommendations at this time for us.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hall. Okay, moving on, and I'm now on page 10 of 14, and this is just, I won't say just, it is important, a list of activities or situations where parental permission is required. And to me, most of these are self-explanatory. Is there any any additional thought or comment on any of those? And the paragraph in blue, again, emphasizing availability of healthcare services for all students. And again, since we're emphasizing parents here, notifying parents that these healthcare services are available, and acknowledging that consenting to a health care service does not waive the parent's right to access their children's educational or health records to be notified of changes in their children's services and monitoring that goes on. Covers that topic, I thought, quite thoroughly. I was very impressed with the depth of detailing the necessity and the requirement. And again, Dr. Williamson knows I mentioned it earlier about the requirement to have immunizations up to date, and other areas of being cognizant of what's happening with the student health-wise. Are there any questions or comments on page 11 of 14? We'll go to 12 of 14. The very first paragraph does address a sensitive topic, which includes gender identity, sexual activity, or sexuality. And it delineates the grade levels at which that will take place. And that it will not be included in grades kindergarten, fourth grade through fourth grade, which I think is important, and I think was one of the areas that caused some angst when what was happening last year was going on. Okay. Any further questions on page 12 of 14? And this address the parents' concerns about school systems, procedures, and practices it notes a particular article in part 4, in particular 7B of chapter 115C. It does indicate that the parent should submit the concern to the principal in writing, and that I've heard that mentioned several times this morning. The importance of having questions, concerns, particular instructions, policies. As you know, this obviously it's written in very thorough language here. That is a necessary part of the process. Well, actually, the third paragraph, it does give some parameters, outline some parameters about the resolution of what the concern that is at hand, and the process, which I will not read. It's fairly lengthy, but there are several levels of this process whereby the parent does have redress if it's not, or resolve a course of action to take it to the next level. And I'll just say, to my knowledge, and Dr. Williamson, you may correct me, but from what I hear, what I have not heard, I'm in the mind that most concerns, I won't say all, are being handled in a effective and judicial and expedient manner without having to, proceed up the ladder in terms of addressing or considering situations.
That is correct. The ongoing training by our staff to address any issues, absolutely being resolved at the building and within the department. So that's part of our ongoing PD training. Mr. Chair, if I may, I do want to back up page 12 or 14 where we're at. Number 5 in reference to gender identity, sexual activities, sexuality, Dr. Carr, that has never been part of any curriculum that we've offered. The perception may have been, but we've never part of any curriculum. So I want to clarify that. None of that was fact. And then the areas that we have talked, Dr. Carr, in terms of our third-party involvement that help with that training. But again, I want to say none of those topics have ever been part of any of our curriculums that I'm aware of.
No, none of our curriculums have any of these topics involved in them. And so all that dealt with was somebody posting something on a website, but that actually had nothing to do with our actual curriculum that we adopted. So there was nothing in our curriculum that included those topics.
And when did we use a third party?
Yes, we use a third party to purchase the curriculum. And so our, I want to say, what do we call it? The one I just sent you today, this morning, the website. Open Up sells us our curriculum. So we deal with Open Up, who sells the curriculum to us as far as L-Education to help us and look through the pieces.
Meaning that it's aligned to the North Carolina
Carolina
standards.
So everything's aligned.
Right. And we use the health department to assist us how?
The health department assists us when we talk about the upper grades. So looking at high school and teaching some of those pieces, we use the health department for those pieces.
Okay. And then moving forward, and again, so much of this, as indicated by the title of our manual, it is about parents' rights. And virtually every door that could be open to the parent for expression is available and is open. But there again, there, just like anything else, there has to be some rules and some parameters, and most of these statements do have rules in terms of timing. For example, the parent may request in writing from the principal any of the information the parent has to the right to access under, it gives that the notation of the article and chapter, to the principal within 10 business days, shall either provide the requested information to the parent or provide an extension notice to the parent that due to the volume of complexity of the request, information will be provided no less than 20 business days from the date of the parental request. And I will say this, and I'm going back to what I am perceiving of the climate of our school system. You know, all of us who've been administrators have encountered a situation where someone appears, could be a parent, often is a parent. I need this information and I need it now. You need to stop what you're doing and track down that information. Again, I believe that climate is changing. The understanding of the busyness of any particular school, and of course the main goal is education. But again, allowing proper time for the information to be received or to be retrieved. I believe that our parents have been buying into that more and more, but it's good to see it on paper. And again, the language continues about certain actions that are requested for information, and many of those, if not most of those, have attached to that statement a number of days that are required. For example, if the superintendent denies or does not respond to the request for information within 10 business days, the parent may appeal or denial of lack of response to the board no later than 20 business days from the date of request to the superintendent. The board will place parent's appeal on the agenda for the next board meeting occurring more than 3 business days after the submission of the appeal. So that brings in at least 4 different population groups that relate and have a stake in the school system: the students, the parents, the superintendent, and the board. So there's backup and there's cross communication and there's redress, there's opportunities for appeal. I won't say every single base is covered, but there are so many different options and so many different avenues, and but patience is the word, just like it is in so many other ways. You've experienced that, I'm sure, as we all have, if you sit at that desk, especially sometimes. Any questions, comments?
So, Mr. Gentry, if I may, on page 13, in bold under G, it requires us to provide a link to parents for community resources. So Mr. Dale has been able to find a community resource assistance guide that's specific to Robeson County, that's compiled by the North Carolina Division of the Workforce Solution. So once this policy is approved, we will get with Cole and we will insert a link that links that document to somewhere on our website, so parents have access to community resources.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
it's not
Bobby.
that we are trying to generate a list ourselves. Somebody's already done the work. We're just going to tie on to that work.
Thank you. I had that circled and outlined or highlighted. Thank you for bringing that up. Any further questions in that section? If not, we'll move on to 3210, page 101, 102. And this, I won't say this is redundant, but it ties in with information that we have seen in previous sections: parental inspection of an objection to instructional materials. And I think that was covered well in some prior sections, and here it is reiterated, including ways that if a parent does object to materials, certain materials, any materials, there's a method to do that. And I won't, unless someone has a question, again, I won't go into the details, but it's straightforward. I did have this notated in the last paragraph. If there is found that a particular scope of material violates constitutional or other legal rights of the parent or student, the principal or committee shall either remove the material from their instructional use or accommodate the particular student or parent. And I don't know what the accommodations might be, but the overall point is that if material is found objectionable, and I'm assuming that, Dr. Williamson, there would be maybe an ad hoc committee consisting of the media person, principal, and maybe a parent as an ad hoc committee to decide whether or not a particular set of material or book was considered objectionable.
That is correct. And when and if that happens at the building level, we do have central service staff that will sit in on that meeting. To your point, in terms of additional curriculum, we've done that last year. Dr. Carr, you want to speak to that we always provide?
So we always do provide opportunities to review the material, and if there are objections or a parent finds that something they don't feel their child due to religious reasons or whatever, we have adopted and changed things to meet those students' needs. So if anything comes up, we do address those directly depending on that certain situation with a particular child. Sometimes we have somebody due to religious reasons that cannot use certain materials, and so we will change books or but still teach the standards. So we address those individually based on the particular needs of that student.
And if we find additional, it's still aligned to the standards.
It's always still aligned to the standards. So we make sure whatever we do replaces and addresses those same standards that the child would get through the other materials.
And Dr. Carr just addressed that top paragraph on 32 of 10, page 2 of 2. So moving on, and again, emphasizing a well-rounded student and addressing every aspect of education that we possibly can. Comprehensive health education program. I know if you go into the schools nowadays, you will see, I'm gonna say, a much broader variety of exercises, and particularly focused on building body strength, agility, more so than in the past. And I am very proud, and this gets over into athletics, but it's connected, that our board saw fit to make sure that wrestling is offered in every middle school. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. The opportunity, yes.
And I was at a meeting in Fairmont the other night, and I saw one of the wrestling. He's not the head wrestling coach, but he's the top assistant. And he thanked me at UNCP, and he thanked me profusely. He found out I was a board member, and that's the kind of reception that people are seeing. I think overall that the board has really stepped out, and I'm gonna toot the board's horn a little bit. Has really stepped forward to fill in some of the gaps overall in what our students need, and will help them. It will help their development physically as well as otherwise. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on this opening page. It does have a blue a statement that is in light blue there in the middle of the page, which bears reading. Instruction on gender identity, sexual activity, or sexuality will not be included in the health education program in the kindergarten through 4th grade. And then it goes on to say, as required by law at the beginning of 7th grade, reproductive health and safety education will include age-appropriate instruction on sexual abstinence until marriage, STDs, the human reproductive system, preventable risks from preterm births and subsequent pregnancy, and so on. Really, maybe not to that depth, but this has been a part of I'll say the junior high school curriculum ever since I can remember. I mean, it's not taboo to have instruction on sexuality in the right context and in the appropriate context, and as it relates to our students. We just have to be cognizant of the age group and the grade level, and yes, some limitations are in order, but for the most part, they need to know. There is some further information about STDs and particularly HIV and AIDS that is in the next to the last paragraph there. That's, I think, straightforward. There again, parents have the opportunity to review materials and objectives that will be used in the instruction. So in every single, in my view, in every single instructional capacity or topic, the parents have an open door to examine materials that their children will be exposed to. And so, again, I think that's a positive move for our system. And page 2 of 2, section 3540 continues that same level of awareness and communication to us and our community. So again, unless there's specific questions in the interest of time, we will move forward. Moving on to criminal behavior, 4335. And of course, we know that criminal or illegal behavior is prohibited anywhere, not just on the school campus. And the school official, namely the principal at the front level, the beginning level, has the right and the duty to not only be aware, but of possible criminal activity, but to take the appropriate disciplinary action as stated in applicable board policies, and also may be criminally prosecuted. And sometimes, and I'm not going to go into details, I'm sure all of us are aware that, you know, there are different levels of suspension. We try to use, I'm talking about out of school suspension. We do have and have had workable opportunities to discipline students within the school system and not sending them home, which I think has really been a great benefit to us. What I have heard discussion on, and it's been going on for years, and it's not just within our system, is the long-term suspension of a student. And one of the main issues that triggers that, no pun intended, is guns. You know, we've heard conflicting stories that about stories that there's a lot of hearsay in this. It's not all true, but you know, we've heard stories of inconsistency in terms of when long-term suspension is applicable and that it's enforced. You know, and there are a lot of factors that go into that discussion. And again, just because you hear it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. Dr. Williams, do you have a comment on that?
I do. I think most of the discussion is around short-term suspension, which is the authority of the principal. The principal has the sole authority from 1 to 10 days. There's no appeal to that. The superintendent cannot change that short-term suspension. So there's more concern around that particular one than any of the others. But again, that's the authority of the principal, and only the principal can change that short-term. And we have three. You want to address that? That's what I get more than anything else.
I could just speak on myself. I think, Mr. Gentry, we want to keep kids in school as much as possible, and we just don't willy-nilly send kids home. That when the decision has to be made that a child needs to be removed from the educational setting, it's one that's serious. We make sure parents understand our rationale, and definitely appreciate the superintendent's support, you know, when things like that happen. But usually safety has to be first. And so we're going to make sure our campuses are safe, and then we're not going to let children impede other children's education.
That's correct. And I'm clear with parents and our staff are clear too. It is not subjective. It is a violation of an approved policy. That's what leads to that. And sometimes people fail to understand there's been a violation of our policy. Bobby, if we have to long-term, it's been our practice that we understand students have a right at the federal and state level for a sound basic education. So we now connect kids to the learning. How?
So if every student that we have been brought forth for long-term, and if it has been approved, we've also connected that student through our Apex platform. So they do have the opportunity to maintain and continue their education. At that point, it's up to the student and the parent to fulfill those requirements. And some do and some don't. But it's not just that we kick the kids out of school and don't provide them anything. We do provide them that opportunity. And to add to the principal's conversation about suspensions, I think 3 years ago, we came up with a unified discipline matrix across the county. So there is some uniformity of how suspensions are handled throughout the county. It's just not you're going to get one suspension for this offense at one school and it varies going to another school.
And I was just going to piggyback with Dr. Barton. Most of the major suspendable offenses is already gone over with all the kids before the school. And I'm pretty much every principal does that. So listen, if you know this, you're going to get this. And if it's something that's continuously, it's always addressed with the parent when we brought them in. So next time, this is what's going to happen. So there's no gotcha or anything like that. I mean, they know what's going to happen beforehand, not most of the time.
Even we're bound by law. If there's a weapon involved, that's an automatic 365. We did ask the board, will you allow us, because we have no obligation on a 365, but the board has allowed us even to extend to that student the opportunity not to lose a year of learning because we provide Apex for 365 weapon students, correct?
Yes, so there have been instances where a student has had a weapon in their possession, and we've allowed that same opportunity for those students as well to continue their education. It's just not on our campus.
Is that in a physical location, Mr. Bob?
No, sir, that would be at home.
Okay. Okay. And in the information on page one of two goes into substantial depth. And that pretty much reiterates the discussion that's occurred here in just the last few minutes. Depending on the circumstances, including the nature, I'm on paragraph A of the crime or alleged crime, the child's age and publicity within the school community, reasonably or legally required efforts may include changing a student's classroom assignment or transferring the student to another school. And I'll read that takes place after the child or student's return from the suspension. That there may be an alternative placement of that child, that student. So it goes on into a lot of depth, and for the sake of time, unless someone has a question, we won't read through it in its entirety. But does reiterate, again, what we already know of being cognizant of what is taking place on the individual campuses. And, if there is, using some common sense, so we're intelligent, educated, responsible adults, and that, any of the offenses listed, and it's not limited to those offenses, must be reported to law enforcement. All of these are, of course, serious offenses. These are not minor disciplinary issues here. But again, I think that's pretty much self-explanatory unless someone has a particular question. And again, promptly notifying the parents. Almost every section, the parents' role and their need to be and requirement to be notified in a reasonable amount of time promptly. All right, we'll move on into surveys of students.
And Mr. Gentry,
Yes,
if
sir.
I may, this is another one that between the time the Parent Bill of Rights came out and the follow updates came out, they changed. So if you will look at policy 4720 and the follow updates, you will see that they've added a section that about opportunities for parents to opt out of protected surveys that refer back to the Center for Disease Control and Youth Risk surveys. So there has been a statement added versus what you're seeing here. So when we look at this policy, we need to look at the one that's located in the follow updates.
Okay, the follow update.
Yes.
It'll be coming.
Yeah, so we don't really need to address it here. We can address that one in the follow updates.
Okay. And on page 104 on the 4720, the topic of protective topic survey is addressed, and there are numerous examples of those which relate to or a part of a person's individual rights. For example, it takes in consideration political affiliation or beliefs that the students parents may hold, mental or psychological problems, sexual behavior, attitudes, incidences or situations that are entitled to a certain amount of privacy. I think to address that succinctly, and that's what the topic or the phrase topic, protective topic survey is all about. That the population who is completing the survey is relieved from answering particular questions that relate to those particular areas. I guess my question would be, there could be some ambiguity as to does this particular question or topic relate to the intent of the survey, or should the student be able to pick and choose regarding answering or complying with a particular question or series of questions on the survey? How will the delineation or the separation, categorization of questions that are sensitive be categorized, or the notification that you don't have to answer these questions because they're continued protective?
Right. So at this current time, we are not allowing any surveying of our students to take place in the district unless it's one that's required by DPI and or the federal government. And that this policy, again, when we go and look at the other one, we are required to participate in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention of Youth Risk Behavior System Survey and the National Youth Tobacco Survey. But outside of those, our students are not participating in any surveying at the schools.
So so the content of the surveys have already been screened by DPI.
Yeah, yes.
And if they fall in this category, they're not in.
Yes.
And so the practice is not to opt out, but to opt in on those surveys.
Okay. Moving on. School system will notify parents beginning next school year for the specific prospect dates of administration of protective topic surveys. As I read through this in similar paragraphs regarding surveys and in the next page too, 4720, I saw what I perceived as the potential to add extra work for teachers with some of this, and I'm going on to also to the next page. The school system generally will not collect, disclose, or use personal student information for the purpose of marketing or selling the information or otherwise providing information to others for that purpose. And then the next paragraph seems contradictory to an extent. Proceeding rules for the collection, disclosure, and use of personal information do not apply if the school system collects, discloses, or uses personal information from students for this exclusive purpose of developing, evaluating, and it goes on. But my point is this: could there be a more concise, efficient way of collecting this data? And indeed, I think it already is, without inducing a separate survey in the middle of the year or any other time of the year except the one that's designated, which usually is at the beginning of the year. And I certainly understand, entity coming in and wanting student information for the purpose of selling. And maybe I'm misreading this, but now I'll just point blank ask. And again, I'm addressing the second paragraph there. Is that even necessary? And I hope you get my drift now. The paper, I'm thinking of the teachers and all the paperwork that they have to do. Is there a situation in the middle of the year where X, Y, Z situation comes up and and that information, the student's personal data information, what I'm trying to get at is duplicating. I read this as a possibility of duplicating and thus putting extra work on folks.
No,
I could be wrong.
yeah, so at no point throughout the school year are we sharing personal protected information with outside entities. So to add to that, then that we're not already doing it, Ms. Thoman is working through a third-party integration system where any software program we use within the district must meet certain security criteria. So at no point in time are we collecting any additional information than what we already have throughout the school year. But on top of that, we are not then taking that information and giving it to outside entities. Now, we are required to do some if military come in and there are certain things that they need in terms of certain students, our seniors, then that information is shared with them. But other than that, no outside information is shared with a third party individual.
Okay. All right, and that covers it for me. Any other questions for that section? Then we'll move on to student health services, 6120. And here again, I think that health cannot be overemphasized. There may be an already answer to this question, but it addresses, of course, the administration of medication, and we know that there has to be rules in place, policies are in place, rules are in place, in terms of permission, authority granted by parents in writing and the correct dosage and so forth. But this one just came to mind. Do we have in place required CPR training for all school personnel? Do we have that in place now?
No, it's not. It's not required for all school personnel. We do have our first responders that would participate in CPR training. But to say that every teacher, every staff member on campus has to be certified in CPR, the answer would be no.
But we do have
We have designated
responder.
first responders on
Okay.
campus.
Okay.
But we do require that for students in the Westland.
So in order to graduate, everybody has to go through CPR training. So in 8th grade, every single child is supposed to complete CPR training. And if they do not have that, they get it through high school. And so that's one of the graduation requirements for all of our students now.
Mr. Gentry, Mr. Bobby, since this says health services, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but it had been brought to my attention about Narcan on our school campuses. So I think there's some legal things about who can administer it, but I had a couple of parents had just talked to me about, was it available? Because especially with what we deal with the fentanyl and other stuff. So what's the legal situations with the Narcan on campus?
At this time, I would like to see that in the school, but there's so much involved in getting that implemented. I've been talking to some of the other healthcare supervisors in other districts and how they go about getting that started. But at this time, the SROs on each campus are the only ones that, I guess for legal purposes, in administering that. And there's so much that comes with Narcan. But the SROs right now are the only people that I'm aware of that carry that on each campus.
And I just want to clarify one thing with the CPR. They just need to know how to do compressions. That's what all the students, they're not getting certified in CPR, but that is the requirement, that they know how to do the chest compressions for CPR.
Okay, and just reading again, page 1 of 2. The content again seems to be very straightforward. Unless anyone has a question, I think we can move on from there to 6120. And I think under number 7, that's common knowledge, and has been policy for many years about the confidentiality of medicinal and health needs. And it cites Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And again, most of the content seems to me to be straightforward. Dr. Williamson, I'm thinking out loud because I'm sure I heard this when we heard that wonderful. I call it wonderful, wonderful for the purpose of addressing a widespread, I'll even say epidemic, mental health issues. It's not isolated, restricted to our county. It's an epidemic everywhere. Since suffices to say, I think we could put a big check mark
Yes.
beside that.
Yes.
I was so pleased to see that. I have a family in my family there. That situation exists, and I'll just say that kudos, great. And again, that last portion of that page just supports the topic. We can move on to staff responsibilities. Section 7300. And again, to me, self-explanatory. Actions, rules that when a teacher, administrator, school board member signs on, if they don't know and not familiar with these policies, then they need to get familiar with them because they are obviously basic to the successful operation of the school system. I do have one question that doesn't relate to that specifically. It's at the bottom of the page. Employees shall notify the assistant superintendent of human resources if they are arrested for, charged with, or convicted of a criminal offense, including entering a plea of guilty nolo contendere. Historically, has that been the case?
The board just approved a new system that we automatically get notified when someone is arrested. Now, historically, we did not. It was dependent upon the person to tell us. But now, Ms. Cameron, you want to address that, but you did approve a system that we get automatic notification.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gentry. So usually within a day of the incident, the person, whether it be a ticket or arrest, whatever, we get notified within the next day of that incident. So using for an example, if something happened that Saturday, by Monday morning, we'll get notification and we can respond to it as needed.
So that's automatic now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay.
May I ask a procedural question on this? So Bobby, what we're recommending is this batch of policies as it relates to parental rights, we approve separate from our overall policies, correct?
Well, we would have, except for those 2 policies
Right.
that they've made additions
Right.
to in the fall updates.
Right. But some of the language in parental, so that's and we meet the letter of the law by
Yes.
approving that batch, and then our overall policies
Yes.
update. Great.
And so, Mr. Gentry, if I may, as we move to the fall updates, none of these are complete rewrites. All of these excluding, as I stated, 1310 and the one that makes reference to student surveys, 4720. Other than those two, there are minor changes to all of these policies. It could be as simple as just an addition of a new general statute, but there's no complete rewrites in the fall updates.
Okay, and you cited particularly 1310 and 4727.
Yes, so 1310 is the first one in the fall updates. We've already reviewed that one and the original change in it. So there will be no need to review it again because we've covered it.
Okay, and there may be some additions for 4720.
And 4720, we've already covered it as well in the Parent Bill of Rights.
Okay, 4720.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So we would basically need to start with the minor revision in our counseling in 3610. And that makes reference to, and Jadelle has already started work on this one, but beginning in the 25 school year, this particular policy and general statute would require us to have peer-to-peer support groups. And that is located on page 2 of 3. And also on page 2 of 3 makes reference to general statute that will require us to provide opportunities for students to graduate within 3 years. Again, that starts in 25, and we're working through all of the logistics for that of how to inform parents and what that course of study would look like.
Okay. And Bobby just alluded, there are 2 pages, actually 4 pages of policy updates, and there are specific number that correspond with them. And, you know, sometimes when you look at policy manual, the notations or the information regarding the particular proposed policies will not have a bold recommended or required, but it looks like in every single one of these, there's either both
Yes.
required or recommended. So in other words, this is, you know, this is what it is. This is what we are required to have. We've been going a while. Does anybody need a break? Or you want to keep moving? Try to get through it. We still got a ways to go.
Yeah. 5 minutes.
We'll take a 5-minute break. Okay,
Yeah.
let's do that. let's get back to going here and see if we can move on through the rest of this. The next section, 1310/44002, 1 of 14. Parental involvement. And of course, the thrust is to get parents involved in more and meaningful ways. And I did note that for purpose of this policy, parent includes parents, legal guardians, and legal custodians of students who are under 18 years old and who have not been emancipated. I think that, I know that's an important notation because as we all know, family situations have a lot of different variations and compositions. Our students don't all come from nuclear families, and that's common knowledge. But thankfully, I have found, I won't say the majority, but there are many students that have an adult who is an advocate for them and is meaningful to the student in a lot of ways, in school and out of school. And I was at a Kiwanis program a couple of weeks ago that was about not foster parenting per se, but being an advocate for a child, both in school setting and outside of the school setting. But again, the various ways, or some of the various ways that parents could be involved are listed on this page. And again, we just had to be continually cognizant of that and coming up with creative ways to invite parents to become more involved. And again, that's what this particular section is about, parental involvement and actually having a plan.
And Mr. Gentry, if I may, now this is the same policy that we reviewed earlier with the addition of on page 9 of 14. They did add E in there. So there's nothing changed between the Parent Bill of Rights and the fall update other than E being added on page 9 of 14.
Okay.
And that's why we approved separate.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind,
Yeah,
unless there's any questions, we can move on, right? Okay. Sounds good to me. All right. And we might be able to say that, apply that all the way through the remainder of 1310.
Yes, you're right, correct.
Yeah.
Nothing's different in 1310 other than that addition on page
Okay.
9 of 14.
Great. That sounds good. Let's do that. All right. We'll move on to 3610, counseling program. And I think I'll just make one comment here. Again, most of this is self-explanatory. Just reiterating that the counseling program is the shared responsibility of teachers, counselors, parents, and community members. I think counseling is often thought of as an isolated one-person responsibility. That a student goes and talks to one particular person. But really, if we're doing our jobs, all of us should take on the role of counselor to some degree, and that applies in other endeavors other than school. And again, so much of this is self-explanatory. Counseling service may be provided on an individual basis or large groups. We know that. Counseling programs are most effective when voluntarily entered into by a student. Now there are times when counseling may be mandatory. And one of those could be, even as we were discussing, legal situations or where a student has been in trouble with the law or has a constant disciplinary, has constant disciplinary issues or problems. Various situations that can call for that. I did make a notation. I'm going on to page 2 of 3 now. Notification of safe surrender law. School personnel shall annually provide all students in grades 9 through 12 with information on the manner in which a parent may lawfully abandon a newborn baby with a responsible person. I don't know. I had mixed feelings about that, and about in a real life situation, how that would happen. And I know what does happen, as we all know. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments on any of these? But that one in particular stood out.
So if Jadale's still online, I believe Jadale and I think have discussed this earlier. She should be able to answer that.
Hey, good afternoon. So with the safe surrender, we have posters that are up throughout the school that has information about who to call. And addressing that with staff and with students. We don't sit down and discuss that with them on a one-on-one basis, or we don't have that. But it is some information we can put at the very bottom of the poster for them to be able to know in the upcoming year on where that they can do that for that safe surrender. And that would be only for grades 6 through 12. But that can be advertised on the bottom of the poster for all the ones that are in the school system now on who to call if you need additional help or support.
Okay, thank you, Jadale. In red, I'll just mention the in red peer-to-peer support program. All schools with grade 6 and higher will have peer-to-peer student support programs and address areas such as conflict resolution, general health and wellness, and mentoring. Schools are encouraged to implement peer-to-peer student support programs in their grades as appropriate. And I don't know, maybe somebody can tell me, do we have a peer-to-peer support program in any or all of our schools where that's organized in a formal kind of way? Often students will confide in each other a lot sooner than they will staff member.
So based upon legislation, we are not required to have this until the 25 school year. Now, Jadale may have some information if schools have started something recently, but for us, it won't be required until we start school in August.
We do have 3 peer mediators in the district, and they facilitate that as a model that was done very long time ago. But they do some peer-to-peer support, but it won't be, like Mr. Bobby said, fully implemented until next year, but it'll be built on what they're already currently doing with peer-to-peer support interventions in the schools for the 3 middle schools.
Okay. Thank you, Janelle. Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll move to staff-student relations. Page 104 under 40, 40, 7310. And again, these are the expectations that are expected of all school personnel in their interactions with staff and students. And it includes staff that come from the outside. The outside meaning they're not at school every day, like independent contractors, school safety officers, volunteers, but do not include student employees or student volunteers. And then there's a section on romantic relationships and sexual contact prohibited. And it was common knowledge, of course, that those kinds of relationships are prohibited, whether it be an employee and a student, or an employee and another employee carrying out that type of relationship on campus, which has been in place for a long time, and I think we're all aware of that particular policy and rule. Are there any other questions on that section? And again, electronic, we had to be judicious and correct and appropriate in the handling of electronic communication, including social media, and of course, social media between staff member and student is not prohibitive. If it is related to a school project or school activity, or something that pertains to the student's teacher, student, staff relationship, but is prohibited outside that context. And the next page addresses that in detail. And again, I see it as straightforward. Anyone with reasonable intelligence can obviously read that and comprehend and follow what the proper procedures are. And same thing on page 3 of 5. Okay, so we can move on. And of course, principal has any reason to believe that a student has been the victim of a criminal conduct shall immediately report the incident in accordance with policy 4335, criminal behavior. And number 4 has to do with reporting. Any administrator, including superintendent, deputy, assistant superintendent, goes on, has a legal duty to report any misconduct of a licensed employee or complaint that a licensed employee has engaged in misconduct, in dismissal, disciplinary action, or resignation shall report the misconduct to the State Board of Education within 5 days of dismissal. It goes on to the responsibilities of noting the misconduct, and if it's within the scope of the principal's jurisdiction, to take whatever measures are necessary. It does note that, and I'm not real clear on this about the conditions under which this must be reported to the State Board of Education. What type of actions would be necessary to report to the State Board of Education?
Mr. Gentry, so there is a form called the license misconduct form that I'm duty to report to the state of any injury to a student by a staff member, or any sexual interactions with the staff member, with the student, whatever. There's a form I actually have to fill out and email to the state about that and report the incident and go into detail about that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And the rest of that section addresses that procedure that you just, broader, you did it well in detail and concisely. But essentially, the way I read it, and some of this is crossed out, but you said it well. Thank you. All right. Well, then, can we move on to 4110, immunization and health requirements for school admission? Again, the accent on health, and here is a comprehensive list of immunizations that are required for initial entry. And I will not read those to you. You can read those for yourself. You need to go to the website for North Carolina immunization requirements. You may do that. All right, we'll move on. And this is additional information about immunizations. Dr. Williamson, I think you addressed this earlier. If there is a failure, or if a student does not have, the parent doesn't present verification of immunization, a proper immunization, that essentially what it's saying, the way I read it, is there's a 30-day window to get that done, and through which the students may attend during that time. Okay. And then there's a section on health assessment and vision screening, which again is to me, it's self-explanatory. And the rules that must be followed, actions that must be taken, like with the child who receives and fails to pass a required vision screening, must obtain a comprehensive eye exam by duly a licensed professional. Are there any questions on that section? All right, moving on. I think most of what we will or have seen from here on out that is in bold, in black print, is fairly self-explanatory, and I don't see a need to cover that in detail unless there are some some particular questions. Hopefully what we've had a chance to read this and note.
And so, Mr. Gentry, if I may,
Situation.
policy 4240, page 3 of 5, part D, just makes reference back to the previous policy we just reviewed, 4040 of HR's responsibility report to the State Board of Education misconduct by staff members. So they just reworded part D to align to the previous policy.
Okay, so, and part of that I see is stricken.
Yes.
And that follows in line with what you were just saying. Make that notation.
Yeah, Ms. Stretch, on policy 4342, student searches, let's have our principals walk us through that process. It's always good to get to hear that in terms,
43, 42.
student searches. Maybe
You want to talk?
I know, I think I'll lend to the senior.
That's fine. Don't do it very much. Like I said, we just do it when we have to, as far as searching the student's person, but we do random checks and go through those, but it cannot be single anybody out, cannot do anything that is, well, what would right be discriminatory, exactly, yeah. But like I said, now when we do get a credible source of something, we do go out there and we do make sure we check the student, check the locker, check the car, whatever we need to do, where to say anything was at. And all that is just to assure safety for each individual student on campus. But now we do make sure we follow through with if there is a threat that is given to us, we make sure we do every attempt to make sure we nullify that threat. So.
And we have to have reasonable cause versus the police that has to have probable, reasonable suspicion versus probable. And so we try to do that on the school end first, before getting our officers involved.
Yes.
Gentlemen, can you still do the searches like if you have a suspicion and you go in here and put 20 homeroom names in there and I'm gonna search 2 of these homerooms? Can you still do that?
As long as it's random.
Random. Still do the same thing like that on buses?
Yes, sir.
Okay, as long as it's a random thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll make this comment, and then Mr. Jason, you probably heard me say this. There's a lawyer told us in Raleigh 15 years ago, he said, you can search any student you want to with your hands, as long as you stay 12 inches away. That's the way the lawyer told us. He said, search anybody you want to, just keep your hands 12 inches away. And and I understand what they were saying, but it's, anyway, I'll leave that there.
And I'm gonna tell you what, being a middle school principal taught me, I notify parents when I do it too. And as an assistant principal many years ago, I didn't always do that, but I pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what we did and this is why we did it. And a lot of times it's to clear students, if nothing else. Yes, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, and you'll have parents come and say, you can't search my child unless I'm here. No, that's not the law. That is not the truth. That is not the law. We're gonna make sure we follow what the law says.
and Mr. Craig, to your point, because of the suspicion, you don't have to be right. That's what people don't understand. I just need reasonable cause, and I don't have to, our hope is we don't find anything, but we don't have to be right.
And so to add to your lawyer advice, Mr. Craig, last year we spent, we were able to fund, if I'm not mistaken, high school guys helped me out, 4 additional hand wands per campus, all the way down to elementary folks. Ms. Troy got at least 1, if not 2. So every school in our district has multiple hand wands that they can use to search students.
So reasonable cause is general suspicion. Probable cause is you've got more than just an idea or reasonable cause. you got some substantial evidence in some way, shape, or form that is likely that this student has a weapon.
Okay, there we go. But most time what we do is if this even in question, like me, tell the SRO stay back, I start it off, and then if I find something, then he can step in because we have a whole lot more leeway than the officer in that situation. So that way to make sure, because we don't want to make sure anything does anything wrong and you can't use it in court or whatever. So like I said, if I have reasonable suspicion to feel that somebody has something because somebody just come and let me know whatever, then I'm gonna go check it out. He cannot do anything with me as an SRO because he does not have that same probable cause of what he would need. So like I said, that way everything stays in check.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I think the next section is now covered based upon what the input that we've just heard from Mr. Barton and Mr. Sugg. Okay. And 4342 continues with the various methods of searches that may be warranted. Pick a note, and this goes back to 1 of 4 school officials may search a student's desk, locker, and personal effects, not including to purses, bags, or not limited to purses, book bags, and outer clothing. Use of wireless communication devices addresses the circumstances under which searches students with cell phones and other electronic devices may be conducted. Okay. I think the rest of it is fairly self-explanatory. Unless there are any further questions. All right, we'll move on then to surveys of students. Beginning on page 4720, page 1 of 4.
And Mr. Gentry, again, this is one that's covered in the Parent Bill of Rights. There was just one update that needed to be added on page 2 or 4 in the blue that provided parents the opportunity to opt out of those mentioned earlier, mentioned surveys. So there's no difference here in this policy than what we discussed with the Parent Bill of Rights.
Okay. Okay, so then we can move more efficiently. Well-being questionnaires and health screening forms. And again, I think that is straightforward. And it does mention the protective topic survey. That this well-being questionnaire falls under that, the auspices and the requirements of protected topic survey. All rules for protected topic surveys as described above gives the reference. Okay, moving on to 4720, 3 of 4. And I think this is kind of goes back to and mimics what we discussed earlier about student data and collecting the student data and for the for particular purposes. And again, the emphasis on notification of parents at the beginning of school year for specific and approximate dates of such collection or use to allow parents to inspect any instrument used to collect the information before the instrument is administered or distributed to a student. For other parents, the opportunity to opt out of the collection. And I get that, but again, I'm concerned about the handling of paper, the work that, and it may be necessary, but I'm a little concerned. You know, we give so much for our teachers to perform, and I'm just, I don't know, that one just kind of throws me a little bit about you know, these giving the forms out, allowing the parents to inspect the form, which I realize they have to do. They have the authority and the privilege of doing the right to do. I'm just wondering how this can be done in an efficient manner. And I have no idea what or how at this point, but I'm just thinking that's the vein that I'm thinking in is what we are expecting our teachers to do in administrative capacities other than instruction. And then again, too, I realize that some of this is required, and this seems like the very same thing we just saw a while ago. So we'll move on to 5210, distribution and display of non-school material.
And so, Mr. Gentry, the major change in this one is the allowance of farm signs on school property within farm season. So that is the major change or major addition here. And when I looked at what those farm signs were, because I was kind of thrown back as to what they're talking about, it will be a sign that would say, caution, this is a working farm down the road, something of that nature, just to notify the community that there's a farm around. If a farmer choose or requests to put a farm sign on our school property, that is the only addition to this policy.
Okay, that's what the caution is what I was thinking about, and I wasn't absolutely clear. Okay, moving on.
Real quick, let me just ask Dr. Williamson, if you will, touch base on this, Dr. Williamson, if you will, what a board member can do as far as political signs. You knew where I was going, political signs and campaign. Is that why you walked out? I got you when you come back in. Make sure it's clear.
Right away, for one, we're having the school board attorney to look into some things that's happened, and he's going to share that information.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, I know it's coming.
Okay. Uh, 5210, page 205, distribution and display by non-students. And this is, of course, addressing situations other than political signs. And one that came to mind was the placement of signs near a school campus for photography. A photographer enlisting or soliciting his services to take school pictures. And there was some, in this particular instance, this was a long time ago, there was some competition between that particular company and another company. And at that time, I got into a conversation with one about where he was placing the sign. And quite honestly, at that time, I did not was not aware of the specific rule about how close to the school premises that a commercial entity can place their signs, and I'm sure there's a specific regulation governing that as well. Does anybody have any thought, comment on that in particular? Okay, and then common sense governs the nature of the material that's on the sign. Materials will not be screened for viewpoint. The reviewer shall prohibit the distribution and display of any publication of material that, and it goes on with a list, which I won't read. And then the next page, the following page, 5210.305. And I think it's important to differentiate that the provision does not prohibit a teacher from using political literature or campaign material for instructional purposes, as long as it's non-biased or does not project or display the teacher's personal position or on a particular candidate or party or specific issue. And I'm saying by and large that does not happen, but I'm sure that there have been situations where it has happened, and that needs to be recognized and enforced. And then there's some more literature and instructions about distribution or display of non-school materials. Again, that is pretty straightforward and is as itemized in terms of lettering what it must contain. Okay, any questions or thoughts about any of the rest of 5210? Cannot project any libelous or false information. Of course, that's hopefully, or obscene. Hopefully that's understood. May not be by everyone, or there may be some deliberate violation of that for one reason or another. Hopefully we will not encounter. I don't think that's been a problem
No, we
to my
can't,
knowledge.
we can't say things like Duke is the best team in the nation. We can't say that.
No, we can't say that.
But it has not been.
All right, 6220, operation of school services, nutrition services.
And Mr. Gentry, the only change here is an update to the website, a reference to USDA website on page 3 of 3. There are no other changes to the policy.
Okay. All right. Well, based on that, hearing that, I will say we can move on if there are no questions. Ethics in purchasing function.
And Mr. Gentry, if I may, in this one, we added on page 3 of 3B training, where everyone who's responsible for the administration of a contract must receive conflict of interest training by every 2 years. And all of our employees, Mr. Campbell, who would fall under this clause, just completed that training this past month in January. but B is what was added to meet the new general statute requirement.
Conflict of interest, such as a relative of a school board member being considered for a contract, in that case, the school board member would absent himself, abstain.
Yes, that would be one incident, or one example. Another example would be a vendor comes to you and says, I'm gonna give you $100 gift card. Mr. Campbell, you want to elaborate on something?
Yes, sir. There are several instances in which, according to the new state law, it went through the whole training about what are conflicts of interest. So if you are exchanging goods for services, that is illegal. So case in point, if a vendor comes and says, well, we're going to take you all out to dinner if you purchase our software, or certain interactions with school employees with outside vendors and contracted services, whatever. So we went through that training as of yesterday. We can say we're compliant to that.
Good. All right. If no further questions there, we'll move on to 6430, purchasing requirements for equipment, materials, and supplies.
And so, Mr. Gentry, the one change here would be on page 4 or 7, which allows us or adds the language to allow us to use competitive group purchasing for installation, labor, and equipment of any HVAC equipment.
Okay, so that was added, that had not been addressed specifically. in the
Yes, sir, on
purchase
page
policy.
4 of 7, number 3.
Okay. Any further questions? Information? On that topic. And I think, again, pretty much self-explanatory. And I even, after reading it 2 or 3 times, I finally understood what piggybacking meant. It ought to be common sense, but it took me, I had to read it 2 or 3 times to understand what I think I finally got it. All right, then. Recruitment, section 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel.
And so here, Mr. Gentry, the only changes that were made are on page 3 of 6. And again, this is to align with general statute, would be D, criminal history checks. And they have moved those requirements for childcare providers from every 3 years to every 5. Under number 2, that first paragraph there, and also removed the language of a start date. It says after September, but other than that, there are no changes to the policy.
Okay, you're speaking of letter D.
Yes,
Oh,
letter
okay.
D, the
Okay.
first paragraph, we have to perform criminal background checks on our child care providers every 5 years now instead of 3.
Okay. All right, so then the rest of that whole section is as was before.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Looking at licensure, 7130.
And here, I'm not sure if Mr. Campbell or his department wants to add anything, but there is a provision that allows, if I'm reading this correctly, service members and their spouse to obtain a North Carolina license if they happen to move to North Carolina and have an outside the state license. Am I reading that correct, Dr. Steele? Yeah. So that we would honor another state's license if they are military or spouse of military and want to teach with us.
With no further requirements.
No further requirements.
Okay. And one thing statement I've seen over and over again in different places, and I haven't experienced a specific problem with this, but the first sentence under E, license renewal is responsibility of the individual, not of the school system. I don't know if that's ever been an issue, but I think it bears repeating.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I see some oh yes and some shaking of the head there.
Mr. Chair, if I may, please. Number 6 is clear in terms of the military. So I want to ask Dr. Steele, is that not the case with reciprocity, or is that a little different? Do we not automatically recognize other license? Can step up to, and because a lot of folks think that through reciprocity, it is automatic, and it's not.
Turn it on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So if a person is applying for an out-of-state license, they will go through the process and they will have to apply through NCDPI. And as long as they meet certain specifications, then they will be given a license. There are certain specifications as it relates to K through 6, as well as exceptional children, that they need to meet certain testing requirements. And so it's not an automatic.
Okay. There are no further questions on that section. We'll move on to leave, 7510.
And Mr. Gentry, here, what was added is on page 2 or 4, D, paid parental leave, where it specifies the amount of time that individuals can take off and it be paid due to maternity leave, whether that be the father or the mother. And so it just gives us language there. And also the next policy over 7520, we had to update our reference in 7520 to accommodate for paid parental leave. And that is on page 8 of 10. So those two policies just piggyback off of each other.
And that's under family medical leave.
Yes,
family
sir.
Medical leave. Okay.
And so on page 8 of 10, you see where we had to add in substitution of paid leave. We had to add the language parental leave.
So then, I'm not seeing it here, but I was seeing some language differentiating between what would be paid. Maybe I'm looking at it and it's looking me right in the face, between in relationship to paid leave. And I guess the question is parental leave considered paid leave?
Yes.
Okay. And I think I know, but please give me a definition that should be self-explanatory of key. Who qualifies as a key employee? I'm down in the restoration and equivalent position. And I see the additional information on 7529 of 10, key employees do not have the right to be restored to the same or an equivalent position upon their return from FMLA leave.
Right, that's correct. For example, if we have a teacher out on FMLA, it simply states that we have to put them back in an equal position, not necessarily back in the same position or same, that's what it means.
But at the same pay?
That's correct. We cannot reduce the pay, but no guarantee to the same school, so.
Okay. Thank you. Continue with health benefits. Okay. That's essentially saying that while employees on FMLA leave, they are entitled to continued health benefits. Okay. Any further questions? Employee conflict of interest.
And this refers back again, Mr. Gentry, to all employees who were oversee or administer contracts are required to go through a conflict of interest training. So they've added that language into section E on page 3 or 4. That is the only addition to this policy.
Okay. All right, move on to daily deposits.
And Mr. Gentry, with this one, the school board is not recommending any changes. They are asking, do we want to leave the $100 daily deposit there or change that amount? If I'm not mistaken, general statute increased. So general statute did change, but we can leave that as it is if we choose to do so.
So
Yeah, general.
we could do that without bringing up any action.
We
just-
can, right. If we
can
decide to
just
leave.
by silence, it stays
Yes.
in place.
Right, so general statute increased the daily requirement to 250. If we want to increase it to 250 where schools have to make daily deposits, we can, or we can leave it at $100.
If you increase, obviously, you're increasing your loss by $150 in the event.
Something happens on campus.
That's correct. That's correct.
What has been our track record? That has been, do we have a good one with money?
I'm
Being
not
in
aware of
place.
any issues, but I guess Eric or Hugh would be able to answer that, more specifically.
Okay. All right. Moving on, participation by minority businesses.
And
I see a goal of 10% of participation by minority businesses. I guess that would be part of what this is saying here, that the goal our goal should be awarding contracts to at least 10% participation by minority businesses in the total value of work for each building.
Yes, so
Project costing $300,000 or more.
And so with this one, Mr. Gentry, the change that was made, is to align with general statute, and that is to add the statement that if an employee ownership plan is 50% owned by a minority, then they would meet that definition. But yes, our goal is to maintain that 6%, that 10%, and even when we're bidding projects, we look for we give preference, or our contractors give preference to minority-owned businesses.
This board does an outstanding job and just far exceed any requirement with that. So, yeah.
So we're in compliance with this now.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
And so, Mr. Gentry, if I may, before we move forward, the remaining file updates from 4330 that go all the way out to 7820, no changes have been made to the language in any of the policies. The only thing that has been updated is all legal references to fall back in line to maybe a general statute or some federal regulation or guideline that may have changed. So the intent of the policy remains the same. It's just that there may be a legal reference that is changed.
okay. And what were those policy numbers? again?
Those are 4130, 4150, 4334, 6220, 6230, 7232, and 7820. Again, just legal references have changed in all of those policies. No language or intent of the policy itself has changed.
Okay. Thank you, sir. 4130, discretionary admission. Dr. Williamson, obviously, there have been, will be extenuating circumstances where a student may seek transfer to another school system or out of a given school system. Just in general, and I don't know how you would define a lot or not many. How are we on that? Is that occurring at a fairly frequent rate either way?
We're seeing more of that, and we really deal with it on a case-by-case basis, whatever those circumstances. But unless there's a justified reason, we normally do not enroll. Yeah. But again, it's on a case-by-case.
Right. Okay. And again, I think they've done a magnificent job of spelling out and making clear the additional information under the various policy headings. We'll move on to school assignment. And the language that I'm seeing essentially addresses, as you briefly stated, Dr. Williamson, reasons why there may be a request and why, and reasons why that request may be granted or denied.
Right.
And
Yeah,
from
outside.
what I've heard, things are going
Right.
pretty much on
Right.
course and
Right.
with no big exceptions.
Outside of policy that clearly defines how we do ask the question, what is in the best interest of that student and how can we best meet the educational needs? So that drives what we,
Yeah, if you abide by that one statement,
right.
I think that that will work, does work. Okay, with no further questions there, we'll move on to 1 of 6, 4334, Nash 5035, 7345 use of unmanned aircraft. And I know we had a long dissertation on this before, and I remember there was some deep discussion about it before, and I did not see any, from what my standpoint of recollection, don't see any major or any changes. My recollection, we have not had a whole lot of unmanned aircraft. I've seen some at some events, but I think the language that covers that here is that first of all, they have to make the correct application. They have to prove that they are FFA certified in order to be able to even be considered for this. And then they have to prove that they have insurance.
That's correct.
And accept responsibility for any mishaps that may occur while they are using the unmanned aircraft, and no one else other than the licensed pilot.
Correct on all of those. It is our intent, just for information, at the new Career Center, we are adding the drone program at that center. So we're excited about that opportunity.
And they have to be registered with the FAA. Okay, if there's no further questions, comments there, we're getting close to the end here. Operation of school nutrition services. Number 8, I do have a question on number 8, under 6220. Child nutrition program funds will be used only for the purposes authorized by law. Indirect costs as defined by law will not be assessed to the C&P unless the program has an operating balance of at least 2 months. What is an example that would allow the child nutrition program to purchase something that was non-food related, food related? Is there any particular reason why they would need to do that?
So this particular one refers to our ability to charge child nutrition for handling their monies in a sense. And so unless they reach that 2-month threshold, we are not allowed to do so.
Okay.
But to answer your other question, no, child nutrition funds are only used to support the child
But
nutrition program,
commodities that operate.
commodities, and or equipment in the cafeteria.
You want to add anything, Mr. Craig? That's you.
I was about to ask Mr. Craig if he wanted to say anything. Didn't want to put him on the spot.
He's just exactly right. You can only use those funds for child nutrition. There's nothing else you can use them for that I know of.
A lot of people are not aware that you're enterprise, and so you really don't get any funding, which is a challenge.
And when I say those funds, and a lot of people don't realize they have to be used to pay the salaries, buy the equipment, food, everything. And I can give you this one that I remember, and it's probably changed. 12 years ago, the salary was $600,000-$700,000 a month for the employees. That was the salary. And you had to have that money coming in to take care of that. So it's an expensive proposition as far as running child nutrition, very expensive.
What is our situation in regarding in a free, reduced, paid lunch? What is our current situation with that?
We currently participate in what we call a community eligibility program. So all of our students, we do not do lunch applications any longer, other than at the early college, but all of our students have the opportunity to eat free.
That's what I thought. I just want to get a clarification. Thank you.
And it is still a struggle now. Even though it's free, this makes reference to 2 months of operating costs. We're at 1.6 months. So again, that's a struggle. We're trying to figure out the breakfast situation. We think that would help us to get to that point. But even though it's free, kids are still not eating at the level that we need.
The more they eat, the more money would come in. And if our students were paying, we probably would not have, well, we wouldn't have this operating cost.
Right.
Because the reimbursement is greater when a child eats free. What the government reimbursements is greater when the child's eating free. And years ago, I don't know if they still use this, that if the county was 80%, I think that was the figure, 80% at a certain level, then you could go free and reduced. And that's what we did. Right at, well, the time I was retiring, the next year we were able to go to it because we had just got to that 80% threshold.
Okay. School meal and competitive food standards.
Let's give a shout out to Miss Charlene. She does an outstanding job. It is amazing how she makes things work for us, but she does it well. So shout out to her.
Mr. Bobby, let me make a comment. I made that $700,000 comment. I was thinking about something else in child nutrition, so it's not quite that. I won't get into another figure, but it's expensive monthly, just payroll alone. And Dr. Williamson, after working with the young lady, I'll reiterate everything you say good about Miss Charlene. She does. It's not an easy program to run, and she does a fantastic job.
And this has been a policy for years that I'm referring to number 2 under B, sale of food and beverages between midnight and the end of the last lunch period of responsibility, the child nutrition program. In other words, there's not supposed to be any type of food related item sold during that time. And I know that's not always adhered to. Just point that out. Any questions? All right. We move on to getting close to the end. Discrimination and harassment in the workplace. Obviously, harassment can occur in different forms and different circumstances. Basically, someone could be someone in authority, or it could be someone of equal authority to the victim of the harassment, who is coercing or otherwise acting in an aggressive or inappropriate manner, sometimes with the intention of inducing a person, another employee, in this case, to do something that they would not otherwise do. And I'm trying to think of some of the legal jargon that goes on there in that definition. And I don't think any of us could say unequivocally that that does not exist, because I think anywhere you have a collection of human beings, at some point in time, there's going to be some form or variation of that, of what that is constituted in that definition. And obviously this policy discriminate, it lists some of the areas where well, it lists discrimination and harassment separately. But anyway, coercing someone to do something or act in a certain way that they would not otherwise behave. And it goes through some of the examples of what can constitute harassment. But again, I think it's self-explanatory. No one has any comment, we'll move on. I think we're getting very close here to the end. Personnel files, 7820. Reiterate what we already know, that no one can come into the central office or school building and demand arbitrary access to any personnel file. They've got to have due authorization and be able to document and furnish that authorization on site immediately. Again, I commend the attorneys and the staff from our association. This is done primarily originally through the North Carolina School Board
Association, yes.
They do a wonderful job, absolutely. Any questions?
Hey, Mr. Gentry, I have a question. So when will these proposed revisions be available on the website or otherwise for public comment?
Mr. Terry, we can place those on there today. I think there's a section I will get with Cole when the meeting's over that says board policies under construction or review or something like that. So we'll place all these policies there.
Okay, thank you. I think it's board policies under consideration or something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Okay. It looks like that brings us to the end of our session, unless there are any further comments.
Yeah, we do need, the committee needs to set a motion in place to approve the policies, because we did not change anything other than adding parental engagement to our parental involvement policy, adding that title to it.
Okay. So do I hear a motion that the policy committee accept the policy as presented with the one addition that Mr. Bobby just mentioned? Make a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. Hearing done. Policy is accepted and will be admitted to the record.
And we will these will be placed on our February board meeting. Both sets for approval.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
being here and your patience.